They burned every building, salted the fields, scattered the survivors across Brazil, and then erased it from every history book for 300 years. What were they so desperate to hide? An African kingdom that survived 89 years, governed up to 20,000 people, and defeated the Portuguese Empire in dozens of military campaigns. The kingdom was called Palmares. It lasted from 1605 to 1694, longer than the Confederacy, longer than the Soviet Union. In 1645, a Dutch officer found 220 houses, 4 blacksmith forges, a church, and a council house hidden in the mountains. An entire African city with irrigated farmland where European maps showed wilderness. Not one American textbook mentions it. History classes teach you about Roanoke and Jamestown's starving time, all those noble European colonization struggles in America. But a thriving African kingdom that succeeded for nearly a century? Silence. Because Palmares proves enslaved Africans didn't wait for white saviors. They built kingdoms, waged war, and won. And that truth was too dangerous to let survive. This is Black Stories Untold. Brazil imported 5 million enslaved Africans between 1501 and 1866, more than 10 times what came to the United States. 5 million human beings torn from their homes, packed into ships, and shipped across an ocean to die in sugar fields. By 1630, Pernambuco alone imported 4,400 people annually. The numbers were staggering because Brazilian slavery operated as what historians call a death machine. People died faster than they could reproduce. The heat, disease, and brutality killed them before they could have children who survived. No natural population growth, only constant replenishment from Africa. And the Portuguese had the audacity to call this impossible to do anything in Brazil without, as if their sugar economy was worth 5 million lives. The vast majority, possibly 90%, came from Angola and Congo, Bantu-speaking peoples from sophisticated kingdoms who remembered complex political systems and military strategies. The Portuguese thought they were buying labor. They were importing people who knew exactly how to build states and defend them. That oversight would cost them dearly. As early as 1597, a Jesuit priest complained about revolted Negroes from Guinea in mountain areas, from where they raid and give much trouble. By 1612, Portuguese reports describe Palmares as having a dangerous reputation. Picture officials sitting in coastal offices, trying to explain to the crown that they had a problem in the mountains they couldn't solve. They tried to destroy it that year. Failed. The name reveals everything. First, Mocambos, Ambundu for hideouts. Then, Quilombos, from the Kikongo, Quilombo. That word didn't mean hiding place. It meant military encampment. That warrior confederation system of Angola's Imbangala people, designed to unite diverse groups for constant war. A state-building toolkit. One governor sent an expedition before 1612. Failed. Another in the 1620s. Failed. Another in the 1630s. Failed. For 8 decades. Because these weren't hideouts. They were building a kingdom. Before we continue, if you believe these hidden histories need to be told, subscribe to Black Stories Untold and help us spread the truth they don't want you to know. Now, back to the video. In 1630, the Dutch invaded Pernambuco to steal Brazil's sugar wealth. For 2 decades, Europeans fought Europeans. Enslaved Africans watched their masters kill each other and made a calculation. If they're too busy to chase us, this is our moment. Thousands fled into the Serra da Barriga Mountains, following established paths to Mocambos that had survived for decades. In the chaos, settlements merged, leaders emerged. What had been scattered sanctuaries transformed into a unified state. By 1645, Dutch officer Jurgens Reinbach reached them. Imagine his shock when he expected crude shelters and instead discovered 2 population centers with 5,000 people each, surrounded by smaller villages spanning 60 leagues. His diary from March 21st, 1645. 220 casas, amid them a church, 4 smithies, and a huge Casa de Conselho, a council house. They had a government. He continued, the king rules with iron justice. This is the Palmares Grandes, of which so much is heard in Brazil, with its well-kept lands, all kinds of cereals, beautifully irrigated with streamlets. Irrigated agriculture. European officials loved to claim Africans were incapable of civilization. Yet here, primitive Africans had engineered irrigation systems, built forges for weapons, constructed government buildings. The Dutch had found an African kingdom that made a mockery of every justification for slavery. The man who united these settlements bore a title that meant everything: Ganga Zumba, Great Lord in Kikongo. According to tradition, he was the son of Princess Akwaltun of Congo, who commanded 10,000 troops at the Battle of Mbwila in 1665. The Portuguese won, killing 5,000 warriors and capturing the king, his family, and 400 nobles. Princess Akwaltun, a warrior who'd led thousands into battle, was sold as a breeding slave. A military commander reduced to forced reproduction, but Akwaltun escaped while pregnant, reached Palmares, and became a leader. Her sons would transform scattered settlements into a monarchy. Royal blood didn't disappear in the Middle Passage. It adapted. By the 1670s, Portuguese reports documented Angola Janga, Little Angola, 10 major settlements, each ruled by Ganga Zumba's family. His brother commanded Subu Puwira, the weapons production center with 800 buildings. His nephew Zumbi led military operations. The capital Makoko contained 1,500 buildings and Ganga Zumba's palace. A 1678 Portuguese report describes the protocol. Those in his presence kneel and strike palm leaves with their hands as sign of appreciation. They address him as Majesty and obey him with reverence. When governors wrote to him, and they did with diplomatic courtesy, they used Ganga Zumba, the proper Kimbundu term meaning Lord. He appointed judges, allocated land, commanded armies, negotiated treaties. The Portuguese, who'd spent decades claiming Africans were incapable of self-government, were literally addressing an African king as Your Majesty. The irony must have burned. The kingdom survives through economic genius. Palmares traded openly with colonial towns, food and crafts for gunpowder, firearms, and salt. Many Portuguese merchants opposed military campaigns because the trade was too profitable. Picture that. Businessmen arguing against destroying Palmares because they made too much money trading with escaped slaves. More valuable than goods was intelligence. Sympathetic townspeople warned Palmares about expeditions days in advance. A 1670 proclamation bitterly denounced those who possess firearms and give them to Palmaristas in disregard of God and local laws. They couldn't stop their own people from arming the kingdom. Escaped slaves started as unfree until they raided plantations and brought back replacements, preventing infiltration while ensuring growth. Those born in Palmares were automatically free. Imagine being born in the mountains, raised in freedom, never knowing chains. Generations grew up who'd never been enslaved. That's what terrified colonial authorities most. Between 1672 and 1694, Portugal spent roughly 400,000 cruzados, 3 times the revenue of 8 Brazilian territories, trying to destroy Palmares. Dozens of expeditions, all failed. The settlement sat in mountainous jungle with sophisticated defenses, wooden palisades, trenches filled with sharpened stakes, hidden pitfalls. Defenders used ambushes, hit-and-run raids, strategic retreats. By the time attackers reached buildings, inhabitants had vanished into terrain they knew intimately. In 1676, Fernão Carrillo, who destroyed smaller quilombos, understood you couldn't fight Palmares like European armies fought each other. You had to burn crops, destroy food stores, make survival impossible. His 1676 to 1677 campaigns wounded Ganga Zumba and captured several of his children. For the first time in 7 decades, Palmares faced starvation. Exhausted, Ganga Zumba sent an embassy in June 1678, 3 of his sons and 12 leaders who prostrated themselves before the governor. Their message: they have never desired war. They only fought to save their own lives. The peace terms seemed reasonable. Those born in Palmares stay free. Ganga Zumba recognized as leader. Legal trade allowed, but they had to relocate from mountain strongholds to Cucaú Valley and return recent escapees. It was a trap, and many saw it immediately. The most vocal opponent was Ganga Zumba's nephew, Zumbi. Zumbi was born free in Palmares in 1655. At age 6, Portuguese soldiers captured him and gave him to Father Antonio Melo, who baptized him Francisco and taught him Portuguese, Latin, and Catholic theology. The Portuguese thought they were saving him, civilizing a savage child. They had no idea they were creating their greatest enemy. At age 15 in 1670, Zumbi walked away and made his way back to the mountains. By his early 20s, he'd become commander-in-chief. He understood European tactics because he'd been raised by them. He knew their weaknesses, and he knew their offers of peace were worthless. By 1679, Ganga Zumba was dead, possibly poisoned by treaty opponents, possibly by his own hand, after watching followers who relocated get re-enslaved. The governor distributed 192 leagues of Palmares territory to 16 Portuguese officers. The treaty was dead. Zumbi was king. His message? No negotiations, no treaties, no compromises. Complete independence or death. For 14 years, he kept that promise. 6 major campaigns failed. In 1681, plantation owners wrote to Lisbon, "Our campaigns have not had the slightest effect on the Negroes of Palmares, who seem invincible." Portuguese colonists, the same people who claimed Africans were inferior, admitted in writing that a kingdom of formerly enslaved Africans seemed invincible. That letter should be in every history textbook. It won't be. By 1687, Pernambuco's governor admitted the humiliating truth. They couldn't defeat Palmares alone, so they hired mercenaries. The Bandeirantes, mixed Portuguese indigenous fighters from Sao Paulo who specialized in hunting humans, arrived in 1692 with promises of land grants and captured slaves. Even they struggled, losing 192 men crossing Brazil's interior, with 200 more deserting from hunger, thirst, and agony. It took 2 years of burning fields, poisoning water, cutting supply lines to corner defenders in Makoko. Even then, Portugal sent 3,000 additional troops. On the night of February 5th through 6, 1694, attackers breached the walls. Hand-to-hand combat, house to house. Portuguese sources report 200 defenders died fighting. Another 200 reportedly threw themselves from high cliffs rather than be captured. 200 people chose death over returning to slavery. Let that image sit with you. 200 human beings who'd known freedom looked at the choice between chains and a cliff and chose the cliff. Over 500 survivors were captured and sold outside Pernambuco to prevent reorganization. Families deliberately separated, but Zumbi wasn't among them. Wounded, he escaped. For over a year, he evaded every tracker while trying to rally survivors. On November 20th, 1695, someone close betrayed him. They executed him immediately, then displayed his head in Recife's plaza to kill the legend of his immortality. Because enslaved people believed Zumbi was protected by orishas, that he couldn't be killed. The Portuguese had to prove he was mortal, had to crush that hope. But you can't kill an idea by killing the man who embodies it. The destruction was systematic. Buildings burned, fields poisoned, survivors scattered, records destroyed. By the 1840s, Brazilian historians found so little documentation they disputed basic facts. The erasure was thorough and deliberate. It worked for centuries. As of 2018, not one American textbook mentions Palmares, despite being the largest maroon community in the Americas. Historian Samuel D. Marvel explained, "The possibility of African achievement in America has never been a tempting one for historians." Translation: Black excellence doesn't fit the narrative, so it gets erased. During Bolsonaro's presidency, officials claimed Palmares never existed, called it leftist propaganda. This, despite Dutch military reports from 1645, Portuguese records from the 1670s, and archaeological evidence. Denying Palmares requires ignoring physical evidence across 3 countries. But when truth threatens your worldview, denial becomes easier than honesty. But here's what they couldn't erase. Today, 6,000 Quilombo communities exist across Brazil. Living communities. 1.3 million Brazilians identify as Quilombolas, descendants who trace their lineage to settlements like Palmares. The 1988 Constitution recognized their land rights, yet only 5 of 44 Rio de Janeiro communities have received legal titles. The fight continues. November 20th, the day they displayed Zumbi's head, is now Black Consciousness Day. In 2023, it became a national holiday. 329 years after trying to kill the legend, Brazil celebrates it. The irony would make Zumbi smile. For nearly a century, Palmares proved Africans could transfer sophisticated political systems across the Atlantic. They created a monarchy governing 20,000 people across 10 settlements. They built an economy, conducted diplomacy, defeated dozens of expeditions, and forced the Portuguese to negotiate with an African king as an equal. But here's what truly terrified slaveholders. Every enslaved person in Brazil knew about Palmares. They knew black people were free in those mountains. They knew Africans governed themselves. That knowledge was more dangerous than any army, because as long as enslaved people knew freedom was possible, not theoretical, but real and existing, they'd never stop trying to be free. The kingdom had to be destroyed for this reason. Zumbi's head was displayed to kill the legend. The story was erased so future generations wouldn't know what their ancestors accomplished. It still doesn't appear in textbooks because Palmares proves the entire justification for slavery was built on lies. Enslaved Africans built kingdoms when given the chance. They waged successful war for 89 years. Black people seized freedom and defended it themselves. No white saviors required. That truth threatens everything the traditional narrative teaches, and that's why they tried so hard to bury it. Quilombola descendants still fight for land rights their ancestors died defending. Far-right politicians continue denying Palmares existed because acknowledging it means acknowledging that everything they believe about racial hierarchy is false. We're telling you this story because the erasure never stopped. It just got more sophisticated. The kingdom fell in 1694, but the idea never died. 6,000 Quilombo communities carry it forward. 1.3 million Quilombolas embody it. November 20th becoming a national holiday proves the memory survived. And now you know the truth they spent 300 years trying to bury. Remember Palmares. Remember Ganga Zumba. Remember Zumbi. Remember that freedom has always been something Black people fought for and won. Subscribe to Black Stories Untold and share this video. Know your history. Know your power.